28th of June, 1941. The North Atlantic, 200 miles northwest of Iceland. A chill wind whipped across the slate-grey waves, carrying the sharp tang of salt and diesel exhaust. The HMS Tartar sliced through the swells like a predator closing on wounded prey, her hull groaning under the strain of full steam. At 1,160 tons, she was a sleek tribal-class destroyer, her four 4.7-inch guns trained forward, turrets swiveling with mechanical precision. Captain Lewis Ben Reynolds gripped the bridge rail, his binoculars pressed to his eyes, the cold metal biting into his gloved hands. At 42, Reynolds was a veteran of the Norway campaign, his face weathered by gales and close calls, a faint scar tracing his jaw from a splinter that had nearly taken his eye at Narvik. "Range to target," he barked, his voice cutting through the hum of the engines and the distant crash of waves against the bow. 3,000 yards, sir," replied Lieutenant Commander Peter Gretton, the navigating officer, his own glasses fixed on the horizon. Gretton, sharp-eyed and methodical, adjusted the focus. There she was, the German weather ship Lauenburg, a squat 3,000-ton freighter repurposed for the Kriegsmarine, her decks cluttered with anemometers, barometers and radio masts that bobbed erratically in the chop. Painted in wartime grey, she looked harmless at first glance, a floating meteorological station, adrift in the vast emptiness of the ocean. But intelligence from Bletchley Park had marked her as a prize. Weather reports encoded in Enigma, vital for U-boat operations, and possibly more. The Tartar's crew felt the tension coiling like a spring. Below decks, able seaman Jack Harlan wiped sweat from his brow despite the cold, his hands steady on the 20mm Oerlikon gun mount. Harlan, a Liverpool dockyard lad of 22, had joined up after the Blitz turned his hometown into rubble. "Bloody Krauts," he muttered to his mate, Tommy Ellis, as they scanned the waves for periscopes. The air smelled of oiled metal and wet wool, the ship's tannoy crackling with orders, "Action stations, all hands to guns." Reynolds lowered his binoculars, his breath fogging in the subarctic air. The Lauenburg wasn't running. Her engines chugged lazily, as if she hadn't spotted the destroyer yet. But that was unlikely. Her lookouts were sharp, trained to evade Allied patrols in these barren waters. "Signal her to heave to," Reynolds ordered. The Aldi's lamp on the bridge blinked to life, Morse code flashing across the gap. "Stop engines. Prepare to be boarded." On the Lauenburg's bridge, Kapitän-Leutnant Heinrich Reuser stared through the spray-flecked porthole, his uniform stiff with salt crust. At 38, Reuser commanded a skeleton crew of 42, mostly meteorologists and signals ratings, far from the glory of the wolf packs. The ship was their lifeline, beaming weather data to Admiral Dönitz's U-boats, helping them time their hunts for the Allied convoys. But now the British destroyer loomed, a grey wolf in the mist. "They're signalling," reported his chief signals officer, Oberfunker Karl Weiss, a lanky Berliner with ink-stained fingers from logging Enigma traffic. Reuser's jaw tightened. Orders were clear. If captured, destroy all codes, the Enigma machine, the works. But the Tartar was closing fast, her wake foaming white. "Engines astern," he commanded, buying time. The Lauenburg shuddered as her propellers reversed, slowing but not stopping. Below, in the radio room, Weiss and his team worked feverishly, the clack of keys echoing as they began shredding documents. The air grew thick with the acrid smoke of burning paper shoved into the ship's incinerator. Back on the Tartar, Reynolds watched the German ship's response, a feeble attempt at compliance. "She's trying to stall," he growled. "Helm, hard to starboard. Close the range." The destroyer heeled over, her decks tilting at 20 degrees, sending unsecured gear sliding. Harlan braced against the rail, heart pounding as the gap narrowed to 2,500 yards. The sea spray stung his face, mixing with the metallic tang from the gun breeches. "Load he!" came the shout from the gun director, and shells clattered into the breeches. At 800 yards, the Lauenburg fired a warning shot from her 105mm deck gun, a puff of smoke, then a shell whistling harmlessly overhead, splashing into the waves astern. "Return fire!" Reynolds snapped. The Tartars' forward turrets roared, orange muzzle flashes lighting the gloom. The first salvo straddled the weathership, water columns erupting like geysers, soaking her decks. Shrapnel pinged off the Lauenburg superstructure, and a cry went up from her crew as rigging snapped. Rusa ducked as glass shattered on the bridge. "Abandon codes! Get the machine overboard!" he yelled. Weiss grabbed the heavy Enigma rotor box, its black bakelite casing cool under his palms, but there was no time. The British were almost alongside. The Lauenburg's gun crew fired again, but the shell went wide, the barrel recoiling with a thunderous crack that reverberated through the hull. The Tartar maneuvered deftly, circling to port, her machine guns chattering to suppress resistance, bullets stitched across the weathership's rails, forcing heads down. "Prepare boarding party!" Reynolds called. Lieutenant John "Johnny" Walker, a wiry 28-year-old from Devon, led the team. 20 armed ratings in battle dress, Sten guns slung, grapnels ready. The air vibrated with the din, engines thundering, guns barking, waves slamming the hulls together. At 200 yards, the Lauenburg's resistance crumbled. Her gun fell silent, crewmen waving white rags from the rails. Surrender. But Rusa, in a final act of desperation, ordered the signals team to the fantail. Weiss heaved the Enigma into the sea, watching it sink with a plume of bubbles, rotors glinting briefly in the foam. Codebooks followed, pages fluttering like doomed birds, before vanishing into the depths. Or so they thought. The Tartar came alongside with a grinding jolt, fenders bumping, lines thrown across the gap. Grapnels bit into the Lauenburg's side, pulling the ships together. "Board her!" Walker shouted, leading the charge over the scrambling nets. His boots thudded on wet planking as he vaulted the rail, pistol drawn. The German crew, faces pale and hands raised, backed away, Rusa among them, his cap askew, eyes defiant. Harlan covered from the Tartar, his Oerlikon sweeping the deck. The wind howled, carrying shouts in German and English, the metallic clink of weapons dropping. Walker moved fast, kicking in the radio room door. Smoke billowed out, the incinerator still glowing red. Papers charred on the floor, but amid the chaos, something caught his eye. A leather-bound volume, half singed, its pages intact. The current month's naval codebook, overlooked in the panic. "Got something here!" Walker yelled, snatching it up. The book was heavy, its cover embossed with Kriegsmarine insignia, columns of numbers and letters staring back like a forbidden cipher. Reynolds, now on deck, nodded grimly as the prize was secured. The Lauenburg's crew was rounded up, zip-tied and herded below, while the boarding party scoured for more. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the waves in bloody hues, the Tartar towed her captive southward. What started as a routine patrol had yielded a treasure. Not just a ship, but a key to the Nazi codes. Thousands of sailors' lives hung in the balance, unknowing, as that single book made its way to Britain's shores. But the real hunt was just beginning. The Wolfpack still prowled, and this was only the spark. The North Atlantic, 29th June 1941. Dawn broke grey and unforgiving over the heaving swells, the sky a bruised canopy that pressed down on the HMS Tartar like a leaden shroud. The destroyer ploughed southward at a cautious 15 knots, her towline straining taut to the Lauenburg, which wallowed behind like a reluctant beast, her captured masts creaking in protest. Salt spray lashed the decks, mingling with the acrid residue of yesterday's gunpowder that still clung to the rails. Captain Lewis Reynolds paced the bridge, his greatcoat flapping in the wind, eyes scanning the horizon for the telltale feather of a periscope. At 42, the weight of command etched deeper lines into his face. This prize was a double-edged sword, valuable, but it painted a target on their backs for any lurking U-boat. Below, in the makeshift brig, hammered together from chain lockers and tarpaulin, the German crew huddled in sullen silence. Kapitän Lieutenant Heinrich Rusa sat on a damp bench, His uniform rumpled, wrists chafed by rough hemp ropes. The air reeked of unwashed bodies, stale bread, and the faint, oily tang of the ship's bilges. Flickering lantern light cast long shadows across their faces. 42 men, from grizzled meteorologists with frostbitten cheeks to young signals ratings clutching their knees. Ruza's mind raced. He'd ordered the Enigma dumped, codes burned, but that book... Weiss had sworn it was ash. If not, the fatherland's secrets were compromised. Lieutenant John Walker entered the compartment, his boots thudding on the grating, a Sten gun slung low across his chest. The wiry Devonian carried the captured codebook under his arm, wrapped in oilskin, to shield it from the damp. At 28, Walker had a nose for intelligence, honed from raiding parties off the Norwegian coast. "Right, you lot," he said, his voice steady but edged with steel. "Time to talk. Who handled the signals?" The Germans shifted uneasily, eyes darting to Rusa, who met Walker's gaze with defiant calm. Oberfunker Karl Weiss, the lanky Berliner, was pulled forward first, shoved into a folding chair under a swinging bulb. His ink-stained fingers trembled as Walker unwrapped the book, slamming it open on a crate. Pages rustled, revealing dense grids of letters and numbers, Bigram tables, substitution keys for the Kriegsmarine's Enigma variant. The leather cover, singed at the edges, bore the faint eagle and swastika stamp. "This yours?" Walker jabbed a finger at it. Weiss swallowed hard, the metallic taste of fear in his mouth. The compartment's hum of generators vibrated through the bulkheads, underscoring the silence. Up on deck, able seaman Jack Harlan stood watch at the towline's aft station, his hands raw from coiling spare rope. The 22-year-old Liverpudlian scanned the wakes foaming behind them, the sea a restless beast churning under the propellers. Wind whipped his duffel coat, carrying the distant cry of gulls and the low moan of the Lauenberg's hull flexing. Tommy Ellis, his mate, lit a woodbine cigarette, cupping the flame against the gusts. "Think we've got something big here, Jack," Ellis muttered, exhaling smoke that twisted away like ghosts. Harlan nodded, remembering the chaos of the boarding, the German shouts, the splash of the Enigma vanishing into the depths. "Aye, Tommy. Could be the end of their wolf packs. But if they spot us..." He trailed off, gripping his Lee Enfield tighter, the woodstock slick with spray. Back in the brig, Rusa broke his silence as Weiss stammered denials. "Enough," the Kapitänleutnant growled in accented English, rising despite the ropes. His voice echoed off the steel walls, drawing glares from his men. "You have the book. It changes nothing. Weather is weather. Our U-boats will hunt regardless." Walker leaned in, the lantern's glow highlighting the scar on his cheek from an earlier skirmish. You could almost feel the tension thicken the air, like the moments before a storm breaks. "Weather? That's your game? Feeding positions to Donitz's packs?" Ruza's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more, lips pressing into a thin line. The interrogation dragged into the afternoon, the ship rolling through swells that sent crockery crashing in the galley. Walker pieced together fragments. The Lauenberg's role in the weather cipher chain, relaying forecasts encrypted via Enigma M4, the four-rotor beast that had baffled Allied codebreakers for months. Weiss cracked under pressure, admitting the book was the Kriegsmarine's short signal key for June, vital for decrypting U-boat traffic. But the real prize, it held cribs, predictable phrases like Wetterbericht, weather report, that could unlock the Enigma's daily settings. Reynolds, informed via the voice tube, felt a surge of grim elation on the bridge. "Secure it in the safe," he ordered Lieutenant Commander Peter Gretton, who nodded, his sharp eyes reflecting the resolve. Gretton, ever the navigator, plotted their course. Scarper flow by nightfall, then straight to the Admiralty. But the Atlantic wasn't forgiving. At 1400 hours, a lookout's cry shattered the routine. Smoke on the horizon, bearing 270. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos. Reynolds snatched his binoculars, heart thudding against his ribs. There, low on the waterline, a plume rising. Could be a neutral trawler or worse, a U-boat tender scouting for stragglers. The Tartar's engines thrummed harder, the tow-line snapping taut, yanking the Lauenburg forward. Below, Harlan and Ellis dashed to their action stations, the klaxon wailing like a banshee. "Load, Star Shell!" Reynolds barked, as the gun crews scrambled, shells clanging into breaches. The air filled with the sharp scent of cordite and fear sweat. You imagine it, the deck tilting underfoot, waves crashing over the bow in icy sheets, every creak of the ship a potential harbinger. Gretton called ranges. 8 miles closing. Reynolds weighed the options, cut the tow and fight or run. The Lauenburg was dead weight, slowing them to 12 knots. Signal the prize crew to stand by, he decided. On the weathership's deck, a skeleton British team, 6 ratings under a midshipman, huddled with rifles, the wind howling through the bare masts. As the sun slanted westward, the smoke resolved into a lone freighter, Scandinavian flags fluttering, false alarm, a Norwegian coal burner evading the war. Relief washed over the crew like a receding tide, but the close call lingered, a reminder of the Wolfpack's reach. Night fell heavy, stars pricking the velvet sky, the convoy's lights blacked out. In the captain's cabin, Reynolds pored over charts by red-lamped light, the codebook locked away. Whispers among the men spread. This scrap of paper could reroute convoys, sink Dönitz's dreams. By Aero 200 on the 30th, Scapa Flow's boom gates loomed in the murk, the Orkney Islands a jagged silhouette against the moon. The Tartar slipped into the harbour, the Lauenburg trailing like a conquered foe. Tugs nudged them to the quay, where shadowy figures waited. Naval intelligence officers in trilby hats, their faces gaunt from long nights. Walker handed over the book personally, its weight transferring like a sacred relic. Rooser and his crew were marched off to a holding camp, their footsteps echoing on the cold stone docks. As the Tartar tied up, her crew collapsed into bunks, exhausted but buzzing. Harlan lay staring at the overhead, the ship's gentle rock lulling him. That one book, fished from the ashes of panic, was en route to Bletchley Park by dawn courier. There, in the green countryside far from the front, minds like Turing's would bend it to their will. But for now, in the quiet aftermath, the ocean whispered of battles yet to come, wolfpacks regrouping, convoys steaming blind, thousands of lives teetering on the edge of that leather-bound edge. 1st July 1941, Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire. The summer sun filtered through the latticed windows of Hut 8, casting dappled patterns on the cluttered desks like fractured code. The air inside hung heavy with the scent of polished wood, cigarette smoke, and the faint, acrid tang of overworked electromechanical machines, bombs whirring in rhythmic clatters, their rotors spinning like frantic thoughts. Outside, the manicured lawns stretched toward ancient oaks, a deceptive idyll belying the war's shadow. But within these walls, the real battle raged, against the invisible fortress of enigma. Dr. Alan Turing adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles, his lanky frame hunched over a sheaf of intercepted messages, the paper crinkling under his long fingers. At 29, Turing was a ghost among the codebreakers, brilliant, awkward, his mind a labyrinth of logic that outpaced his words. He paced the narrow aisle between desks, murmuring to himself, the floorboards creaking softly under his scuffed shoes. Around him, the hut buzzed with quiet intensity. Young women in twin sets and pearls, Buchrener's volunteers, fed punch cards into the machines, their faces illuminated by the glow of dials. The room hummed with the low chatter of typewriters and the occasional cough echoing off the green-painted walls. A door swung open with a pneumatic hiss, admitting Commander Alistair Denniston, head of the Government Code and Cipher School. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes carried the weariness of endless nights. In his hand, clutched like a talisman, was the leather-bound codebook from the Lauenburg, its singed edges a testament to the North Atlantic drama. Turing, Denniston said, his voice low and urgent, slicing through the mechanical symphony. This just came in from Scapa Flow, Kriegsmarine short signal key for June. Interrogation confirms it's authentic. Bigram tables, cribs intact. Turing stopped pacing, his pale blue eyes lighting with that rare spark of excitement. He took the book reverently, its weight settling into his palm like a puzzle begging to be solved. The cover's embossed eagle seemed to glare under the desk lamp's harsh light. "The weather ship," he breathed, flipping it open. Pages rustled, revealing columns of alphanumeric substitutions. WT for weather, predictable phrases that U-boats used in their reports. This wasn't just a key, it was a skeleton key to the Enigma M4's naval variant, the four-rotor monster that had stymied them since its introduction. With this, we can predict the daily settings, cribs for the cribless. Across the hut, Joan Clark looked up from her desk, her dark hair pinned neatly, a pencil tucked behind her ear. At 23, she was one of the few women in the inner circle, her mathematical prowess rivaling the men. The air between them carried the subtle perfume of her lavender soap, a fleeting normalcy amid the ink and ozone. "Alan, if we align it with the traffic from the Lauenberg's logs, intercepts from the 28th, we might break the wheel orders for the current period." Her voice was steady, but you could sense the undercurrent of thrill, the way her fingers tightened on her slide rule. Denniston nodded, glancing at the wall clock, its tick marking the relentless march toward convoy sailings. "Donuts' packs are massing off Iceland. HX-137 leaves Liverpool tomorrow if we decrypt their rendezvous signals." He let the implication hang, heavy as the humid air. Turing was already at work, sketching on a blackboard with chalk that snapped under pressure. Equations bloomed, probability matrices, menu calibrations for the bombs. The machine nearest him, a hulking contraption of wires and drums, groaned to life as an operator, Petty Officer Sarah Wilkins, inputted the first crib. Her hands, calloused from endless keying, danced over the switches, the rotors clicking like impatient teeth. Hours blurred into a feverish haze. The sun dipped low, painting the hut in amber hues that seeped through blackout curtains not yet drawn. Coffee grew cold in tin mugs, steam long dissipated, while the scent of burnt toast wafted from a corner kettle. Turing's team expanded. Hugh Alexander, the chessmaster cryptanalyst, joined with his pipe clenched between teeth, puffing clouds that mingled with the machine oil. "Try rotor order 3VY, Alexander suggested, his Scottish burr cutting the tension. The bomber accelerated, its brushes sparking faintly, the air vibrating with potential. At 2200 hours, a breakthrough. The machine halted with a triumphant chime, lights aligning in green approval. Turing snatched the output strip, his breath catching. "It's cracking. U-557's weather report from yesterday. Position, barometric pressure, all plane. And there's a Wolfpack coordinate, grid AJ42, waiting for SC42. The words tumbled out, his usual reserve shattered. Clark leaned over, her shoulder brushing his, decoding the follow-up manually. The pencil scratched furiously, translating the crib text. U-boats converging 400 miles west of Ireland, primed to strike the slow convoy. "You feel it then?" The electric pulse racing through the hut, like the first rumble of thunder on a still night. Denniston's face tightened with resolve. He grabbed the secure phone, its rotary dial clicking as he connected to the Admiralty. "This is Denniston. Priority Ultra. Decrypts from Lauenberg material. Reroute SC42 north via AM78. Packs at AJ42. Evade at all costs." The receiver crackled with acknowledgement from the operations room in London, where admirals pored over charts under shaded lamps. But triumph was fleeting. Shadows lengthened as the implications sank in. This book had pierced the veil, but Enigma evolved. New keys monthly, rotors reshuffled. Turing slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples, the codebook open before him like a conquered map. "One book saves one convoy," he murmured to Clark, who nodded. her eyes reflecting the desk lamp's glow. But thousands more depend on what we build from it. Outside, night cloaked the park, crickets chirping obliviously, while in the distance air raid sirens wailed faintly, a reminder that the war encroached even here. By midnight, the first dispatches flew out, couriers on motorcycles roaring down gravel drives, sealed envelopes bound for Western Approach's command in Liverpool. There, Commodore Percy Noble would adjust the convoy lanes, threading the needle between Wolfpack jaws. Unseen, the Lauenburg's gift rippled outward, U-boats radioing blindly into the void, their enigma whispers now half-heard echoes in Allied ears. In Hut 8 the work intensified, bommies churning through the night, their heat warming the cooling air. Turing sketched future refinements. An improved bomb, the British bomb, to handle the naval four rotors faster. Alexander coordinated with the American team across the Atlantic, whispers of shared secrets via secure channels. Clark tallied successes, 3 messages fully decrypted by 300, revealing fuel states and morale reports from Dönitz's flotillas, cracks in the Reich's armor. Dawn crept in, grey light seeping under the doors, carrying the dew-kissed scent of roses from the gardens. Exhausted but unyielding, the codebreakers paused for tea, mugs steaming in the chill. Turing gazed out the window, the codebook tucked safely in a steel drawer. That single volume, born of a destroyer's daring, had ignited a chain. Convoys slipping through, U-boats starved of prey. Yet the ocean's toll mounted. Sailors still lost to torpedoes in the dark. The book had saved thousands this cycle, but the Wolfpacks adapted, and Bletchley's war was far from won. As the first lorry rumbled past, bound for London with fresh intel, the hut stirred anew, rotors spinning toward the next enigma. 5th of July, 1941. The Western Approach's command, Liverpool docks. Fog clung to the Mersey like a shroud, muting the clamour of cranes and the lowing horns of outbound ships. The air reeked of coal dust, tarred rope, and the briny rot of low tide, where barnacle-crusted hulls loomed in the murk. Commodore Percy Noble stood on the bustling quay, his Burberry coat whipping in the damp breeze, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he scanned the assembling convoy. At 55, Noble was a pillar of the anti-submarine war, stocky with a bulldog jaw and eyes sharpened by years, plotting U-boat shadows on Admiralty charts. The codebook's whispers from Bletchley had arrived by secure dispatch 2 days prior, transforming his operations room from a guessing game to a chessboard with glimpsed moves. Inside the dimly lit ops center, a converted warehouse with maps pinned to walls like flayed skins, Lieutenant Commander David Callahan pored over the fresh decrypts. The room thrummed with the clatter of teleprinters and the murmur of wafts relaying signals, the air thick with the ozone snap of radios and the bitter steam of boiled tea. Callahan, a lanky Irishman of 34 with ink-smeared cuffs, traced a pencil along the grid. Wolfpack Hecht, 9 U-boats under Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Love, coiled at AJ 42, 400 miles west of Ireland. Their enigma chatter, cracked via the Lauenburg's quay, revealed patrol lines and fuel states. U-201 low on torpedoes, U-557 reporting heavy seas. "Commodore!" Callahan said, straightening as Noble entered, boots echoing on the concrete. SC-42 slowpokes, grain ships mostly, were due straight through the trap. With this, we swing them north to AM-78, evade by dawn. Noble nodded, exhaling smoke that curled toward the rafters. The decrypts were gold, not just positions, but cribbed phrases like nil Sicht, no visibility, painting Dönitz's frustration in plain English. "Signal the escorts. HMS Vanessa leads. She's got the new Type 271 radar. And get that book to the Y station at Scarborough. Keep the cribs flowing." He crushed the butt under his heel, the spark dying with a hiss. Outside, the convoy mustered, 23 merchantmen, from rusty Liberty ships to battered tramps, their decks piled with wheat and timber for the starving isles. Captain Elias Thorne commanded the MV Empire Dawn, a 7,000-tonner from Glasgow, her engines idling with a deep rumble that vibrated through the planks. Thorne, 48 and grizzled from Dunkirk runs, gripped the bridge rail, the fog beading on his beard like dew. "Full ahead, slow," he ordered his mate, the wheel turning as the ship nudged into line. You sense the fragility then, these floating lifelines blacked out and zigzagging into the beast, each wave a potential grave. Escorts fanned out, corvettes like HMS Honeysuckle, flower-class tubs with 4-inch guns and depth-charge racks, their screws churning foam. Able seaman Reg Wilkins, 19 from Cardiff, manned the Aztec set in the Honeysuckle's humid plot, headphones clamped over his ears, the ping echoing in his skull like a heartbeat. The sea's chill seeped through the hull, carrying the metallic tang of wet paint and gun oil. "Nothing yet, sir," he reported to Lieutenant Eric Mills, who paced the dim CIC, sweat beading despite the draft. Mills nodded, his face lit by the green glow of screens, Bletchley's gift rerouting them 100 miles north into safer swells. Aboard U-557, 300 miles distant, Captain Lieutenant Hans-Jürgen Ahrens peered through the periscope in the steel tomb of his boat, the Atlantic's pressure creaking the plates like distant thunder. At 32, Ahrens was a Wolfpack veteran, his Type 7C U-boat a 770-ton Predator, diesel fumes and sweat saturating the air. The conning tower hatch was dogged tight, the only light from red bulbs casting bloody hues on charts. "Surface for traffic," he commanded, the boat broaching with a gasp, waves sluicing over the saddle tanks. Obersteuermann Fritz Keller, the watch officer, tuned the radio, static crackling before Enigma decoded orders from BDU. "Convoy expected AJ-42. Rendezvous Hecht." But the airwaves were silent. No weather updates from Lauenburg, no sightings. Ahrens lit a cigarette, the match flaring briefly, smoke mingling with the sour reek of unwashed crew. "Something's off," he muttered, the horizon empty under a leaden sky. Back with SC-42, night fell heavy by 2200. The convoy a ragged snake threading fogbanks, lookouts straining against the black. Thorne on the Empire Dawn felt the tension coil in his gut, the bridge clock ticking like a fuse. "Zig left," he barked, the helm responding with a groan of cables. Below, stokers shoveled coal in the engine room, faces black with soot, the heat a furnace roar drowning their curses. Suddenly the Honeysuckle's Aztec wailed, a contact, faint but closing from starboard. Mills snatched the phone. "Depth charges, pattern 1!" The corvette shuddered as rails rattled, 8 300-pounders splashing into the whitecaps with muffled booms. Geysers erupted, the sea boiling, but the echo faded. False alarm, a thermocline playing tricks. In the ops center, Callahan monitored via WT, the decrypts updating hourly. U-201 breaking off south, low fuel forcing a limp home. Noble paced, the floor gritty underfoot, his mind racing through scenarios. If they shift grids. But Bletchley's follow-up cribs held firm, the book's Bigram tables unlocking fresh traffic, revealing Hecht's frustration. Convoy vanished. Possible leak. Dawn broke slate-grey on the 6th, the convoy cresting swells off the Hebrides, escorts weaving protective screens. Thorne exhaled as landfall neared, the faint outline of cliffs piercing the mist, gulls wheeling overhead with raucous cries. Ahrens, surfacing U-5557 for air, cursed the empty sea, the diesel engines gulping oxygen with throaty growls. "Blow tanks! Dive!" He snapped at a ghost contact, the boat plunging, klaxon blaring. But SC-42 slipped away unscathed, 23 ships and 200 souls docking in the Clyde by noon, holds intact. In Liverpool, Noble received the signal, a grim smile cracking his face as he lit another fag. The codebooks ripple, one convoy saved, but dozens more queued, HX-137 next, Wolfpacks regrouping. Callahan filed the report, the paper whispering under his fingers, while outside, rain lashed the docks, washing away the salt of near misses. Yet victory was Pyrrhic. Dönitz, in his Paris lair, sensed the shift. U-boat losses mounting, kills dipping. Intercepts hinted at Allied foreknowledge, but without proof, he pressed on, rotors turning anew. At Bletchley, Turing refined the bomb, the Lauenburg's spark fueling innovations. In the Atlantic's maw, the book had bought time, spared thousands from icy depths, but the packs hungered still, their shadows lengthening toward autumn gales. Thorne, tying up, clapped Wilkins on the back, unseen saviors in huts and holds, weaving fate from cipher scraps. The war's tide turned subtly, one decrypted whisper at a time. 15th of August 1941. Admiral Karl Dönitz's headquarters, Lorient, occupied France. The subterranean bunker hummed with the low throb of generators, their vibrations seeping through the concrete floors like a persistent headache. Dim bulbs cast jaundiced light over steel desks cluttered with charts, ashtrays overflowing with cigarette butts, and the acrid haze of Gaulois bleu smoke that clung to every uniform. The air was stale, laced with the faint metallic tang of ink and oiled typewriters, the distant crash of Atlantic waves muffled by layers of earth and fortification. Dönitz, at 49, paced the operations room, his slight frame taut as a bowstring, the iron cross at his neck glinting under the fluorescence. His face, sharp and ascetic, bore the strain of mounting frustrations, U-boat commanders reporting empty seas, convoys slipping through like ghosts. Oberleutnant zur See, Erich Topp, fresh from U-552's patrol, stood at attention, his leather greatcoat still damp from the Biscay crossing. At 29, Topp was a rising star in the wolf packs, his boat credited with a dozen kills. But this return was bitter. No tonnage, just fog-shrouded failures. "The packs are blind, Admiral," Topp reported, his voice echoing slightly off the map-covered walls. He unrolled a damp logbook, fingers leaving smudges on the pages. "Hecht disbanded after SC-42 vanished. Our Enigma traffic, echoes only, as if the English hear our whispers." The room's tension thickened, officers glancing at one another, the tick of a wall clock amplifying the unease. Dönitz halted, his grey eyes narrowing as he jabbed a pointer at the North Atlantic grid. Red pins marked Wolfpack positions, Nappen off Newfoundland, Markgraf shadowing HX 142. But the decrypts from Bletchley, unknown to him, had already unravelled their plans. The Lauenburg's codebook, now yielding cribs for July's keys, fed a cascade of ultra-intelligence, U-boat fuel logs, rendezvous points, even morale dispatches complaining of Allied sorcery. "Sorcery be damned," Dönitz snapped, his Bavarian accent clipping the words. He lit a cigarette, the match's sulphur flare briefly illuminating the Führer's portrait on the wall. "Issue new rotors for August, double the weather reports, reroute via weather subs if needed, and execute find-fart immediately. Strike HX 142 at grid BE19. In the signals annex, a team of cryptographers hunched over Enigma machines, their fingers flying across keyboards, rotors whirring with mechanical indifference. The air buzzed with static from shortwave sets, operators scribbling intercepts on pads slick with sweat. Lieutenant Karl Friedrich Merton, U-68's commander, received the orders via submerged antenna, the boat's hull creaking under 200 meters of pressure. Diesel exhaust lingered in the forward torpedo room, where torpedomen polished G7A warheads, the brass gleaming dully. Merton, 31 and battle-hardened from African runs, scanned the printout in the red-lit control room. "Convoy bearing 310, speed 9 knots, he read aloud, the crew's faces illuminated by the periscope's glow. Excitement stirred, but doubt gnawed. Last month's ghosts haunted them. You feel the undercurrent then, the invisible hand of ultra-steering fates across the ocean's vast chessboard. Far to the west, 10th of September 1941, aboard the USS Reuben James, now escorting ON-24 from Newfoundland. The wind howled through the North Atlantic gales, whipping spray across the deck like needles. The destroyer's 1,190-ton frame bucking against 40-foot swells. Lieutenant Commander William Bill Jackson gripped the bridge wing, salt crusting his eyebrows. the cold seeping through his peacoat like betrayal. At 35, Jackson had transferred from the Royal Navy under Lend-Lease, his American drawl mixing with British orders. The Reuben James, a four-stacker with 5-inch guns and depth-charge throwers, led the van, her Type 286 radar sweeping the murk for shadows. In the dimly lit CIC below, Ensign Maria Rossi, a sharp-eyed Italian-American cryptologist attached via ONI, decoded the latest ultra-flash. The compartment reeked of sweat, coffee grounds, and the oily hum of the plotting table's fans. Charts rustled under her fingers, red lines tracing the reroute. On 24 swung south to avoid Markgraf's trap at BE-19, courtesy of the Lauenburg cribs now embedded in Turing's bombers. "Skipper," she called up the voice tube, her Brooklyn accent cutting the static. "BDU's pushing 8 boats north, U-68 among them, but we're clear by 50 miles if we hold 220. Jackson's response crackled back. "Aye, steady as she goes. Signal the convoy. Zigzag pattern delta." The merchantman trailed in ragged formation. 35 ships, oilers and troop carriers from Halifax, their wakes foaming white against the Black Sea. Captain Harold Jenkins commanded the SS San Demetrio, a 8,100-ton tanker from Liverpool, her decks groaning under 11,000 tons of aviation fuel. Jenkins, 52, with a pipe clenched in his teeth, paced the wheelhouse, the tobacco's sweet smoke battling the diesel fumes. "They're out there," he muttered to his chief officer, the glass vibrating from a rogue wave. Below, stokers in the engine room shoveled coal into furnaces, flames roaring orange, sweat streaming down backs slick as seals. The air vibrated with the piston's thunder, every man aware of the Wolfpack's jaws. Yet Ultra's veil kept them one step ahead. Aboard U-68, Merton's frustration boiled as the sea emptied. The boat surfaced at dusk, the conning tower hatch popping open to gulp diesel-scented air, waves slapping the decks. "Funkmat, any traffic?" he barked, binoculars sweeping the horizon. The radio operator shook his head, static hissing from the speakers. Enigma messages from Lorient urged persistence, but the cribs had betrayed them, Allied escorts dodging like wraiths, convoys materializing elsewhere. Merton slammed a fist on the rail, the metal ringing, as a squall lashed rain across his face. "Reload tubes. We're ghosts in our own hunt." Back in Lorient, 20th September, Dönitz convened his staff in the bunker, the air heavier now with defeat's pall. Top, nursing a bandaged hand from a depth charge rattle, laid out the logs. Markgraf's kill tally, 0. "They anticipate us, Admiral. Like reading our mail." Dönitz's face darkened, pacing faster, the pointer snapping against the map. Ultra's harvest from the codebook swelled, over 50 messages decrypted in August alone, Wolfpack scattered, sinkings halved. He ordered Enigma upgrades, plugboard changes, new indicators, but the damage seeped in, U-boat crews whispering of betrayal. In Bletchley, Turing's team refined the assault, the hut's bombs now synced to American Wild Bills across the pond. Clark tallied the toll, 12 convoys evaded, 40,000 tons spared, thousands of sailors pulling into port to kiss solid ground. The book's legacy bloomed, cribs evolving into full traffic analysis, Dönitz's strategies laid bare. Yet the Admiral adapted, shifting to milk cows for resupply, probing for weaknesses. As autumn storms brewed, ON-24 docked in Iceland unscathed, Jackson toasting with lukewarm rum in the wardroom, the clink of glasses echoing. Jenkins felt the deck steady underfoot, the San Demetrio's holds full, crew cheering as lights twinkled on shore. Merton's U-68 limped home, fuel-starved, the ocean's roar mocking their silence. In the bunker's gloom, Dönitz stared at the pins, the war's balance tilting subtly. One captured book unraveling the Wolfpack's weave, buying Britain breath in the blockade's vice. But the packs prowled on, hungry for the next slip, the cipher war far from silenced. October 1943. The North Atlantic. Convoy on 208, 500 miles west of the Azores. Gale-force winds howled across the storm-lashed sea, turning waves into towering black mountains that crashed against the convoy's flanks with thunderous fury. Rain lashed horizontally, stinging like shrapnel, while the air reeked of ozone and the sharp, fishy brine of upturned depths. The HMS Vidette, a veteran V&W class destroyer, refitted with Hedgehog mortars and improved radar, sliced through the chaos at 18 knots, her 1,000-ton hull shuddering under each impact. Lieutenant Commander Jeffrey "Jeff" Palmer clung to the bridge rail, his oilskin slick with salt water, the cold wind whipping his scarf like a flag of defiance. At 36, Palmer had survived the Biscay's milk runs and the brutal winter of 42, his face etched with the scars of depth-charge blasts that still rang in his ears during quiet watches. Below in the ops room, the air was thick with the hum of generators and the acrid bite of overheated valves from the Type 271 radar set. Sub-Lieutenant Anna Hale, a 24-year-old WRN's officer with steady hands and a mind sharpened by Bletchley dispatches, plotted the latest ultra-intercepts on the chart table. The compartment rocked violently, charts sliding until pinned down, the green glow of the screen casting eerie shadows on her face. "Skipper," she called up the voice tube, her voice cutting through the din. "BDU's Westmark pack, U-231, U-420, 6 more, coiling at grid CD-15. But on 208's reroute holds. We're 80 miles clear south. Their weather ciphers cracked wide. Lauenberg's ghost still haunts them." Palmer's response crackled back, laced with grim satisfaction. "Keep the zigzag sharp. Signal the van. Escorts double up." The convoy stretched like a battered serpent, 45 merchant ships from American liberties groaning under tank loads to rusty tankers sloshing with precious oil, their blacked-out silhouettes merging with the night. Captain Miri Langford commanded the SS Fort Kalispell, a 7,200-ton Canadian freighter in the center column, her bridge a cocoon of red light and the steady thump of her diesel heart. At 41, Langford was a rarity, a woman at the helm, her iron-grey hair tied back, hands gripping the wheel as the ship yawed through 50-foot troughs. The air inside smelled of wet canvas and stale coffee, the crew's murmurs drowned by the storm's roar. "Steady on 245, she ordered her helmsman, a burly Newfoundlander named Pete, whose knuckles whitened on the spokes. Below decks, engineers in oil-smeared overalls wrestled valves in the engine room, steam hissing like angry serpents, the heat a brief respite from the outer chill. You feel the pulse of survival then, every creak of the hull a whisper of vulnerability, the ocean's vast hunger pressing in. Far to the north, in U-231's dripping conning tower, Captain Lieutenant Wolfgang Wenzel scanned the empty horizon through rain-smeared lenses, the Type C's diesels coughing against the swells. At 30, Wenzel was a product of the codebook's long shadow, his patrols fruitless, morale fraying like old rope. The boat's interior reeked of diesel fumes, mouldy bread, and the sour sweat of 44 men crammed in steel tubes. "Funk, any BDU traffic," he barked, the radio operator shaking his head amid the static crackle. Enigma messages arrived garbled, cribbed phrases like "patrol line shift," betrayed by 2 years of ultra-evolution. The Lauenberg's overlooked book had birthed a monster. Turing's improved bombs now devouring naval traffic daily, predicting rotor settings with eerie precision, feeding Admiralty reroutes that turned wolf packs into scattered hounds. In Lorient's fortified pens, October's end brought Dunitz to a fever pitch. The Admiral's office, buried under 20 feet of concrete, echoed with the slam of fists on oak desks, the air heavy with cigar smoke and the faint chlorine tang from the pen's wet slips. Dönitz, now 51 and gaunt from sleepless command, pored over loss reports. 20 U-boats sunk in the past quarter, wolf packs eviscerated before they could close. "They read us like a child's primer," he snarled to his chief of staff, Korvettenkapitän Friedrich Hess, who stood rigidly, his uniform crisp despite the damp. Charts on the wall showed red slashes, sunk boats, outnumbering blue kills. The code book's legacy had snowballed, initial cribs refined into full crib sheets, shared with American codebreakers at Arlington Hall, amplifying the assault. Dönitz ordered a desperate pivot, U-boats to shallow coastal sniping off the US. East Coast, but even there, Ultra's eyes pierced the fog. Back with On 208, dawn broke ragged on the 28th, the storm easing to a sullen swell, sunlight fracturing through scudding clouds. Palmer on the vidette watched the radar sweep clear, no blips, no threats materializing from the decrypt's warnings. Hale tallied the haul in the log, another convoy through, 300,000 tons safe, 2,000 sailors spared the torpedo's kiss. Langford felt the Fort Cully spell steady as Gibraltar hove into view. Her crew emerging topside, faces pale but alive, cheering hoarsely against the wind. Pete clapped her shoulder, the salt crusting his beard. "Ma'am, whatever angels you prayed to, they worked overtime." In Bletchley's Hut 4, the naval section, Joan Clark now led a team of 24, her desk piled with traffic analysis sheets, the air humming with the clatter of Hollerith sorters and the comforting aroma of fresh tea. At 26, she'd risen on the codebook's foundations, her calculations feeding the Y-Service's intercepts. Turing, collaborating from afar on Colossus prototypes, had wired congratulations. The Lauenburg Spark now ablaze, decrypting 80% of U-boat signals, sinking dozens of packs before they formed. "One book," Clark murmured to her assistant, Petty Officer Tom Riley, as she filed the ON 208 report, the paper crisp under her fingers. "Saved thousands, then tens of thousands. Shortened the war by years." Dönitz's final gambit faltered by November. Wolfpacks dissolved, U-boats recalled for refits, the Atlantic's blockade cracked. In London's Admiralty, Commodore Noble, promoted to Rear Admiral, reviewed the tallies. From 41's near starvation, Britain now brimmed with American steel and food, the codebooks ripple fueling D-Day's logistics. Palmer tied up in Gib, sharing rum with Hale in the wardroom, the clink of glasses toasting unseen heroes. Langford watched her cargo unload, crates of munitions for the Italian front, the sun warming her face for the first time in weeks. As winter gripped the ocean, the Wolfpack's howls faded to whimpers, Enigma's fortress breached by that singed volume from a forgotten weathership. Thousands of sailors, Harlan, Wilkins, Jenkins, lived to see VE Day, their lives woven from cipher threads. The war ground on, but the Atlantic's tide had turned, one overlooked book rewriting the sea's savage script. In quiet moments, survivors raised glasses to the Tartars' daring, the codebreakers' genius, and the fragile luck that spared them from the depths. The end came, not with a bang, but with empty horizons, the packs no more than echoes in the waves.